Welcome to Feminine Founder, where we talk all things recruiting, hiring, business, and entrepreneurship. Today, I have Ammie Michaels with me. Ammie is a strategic HR superhero, certified mediator, and strategic advisor to WolfpackHR. So welcome, Ammie.
Thanks for having me.
So I'd love to hear the story behind how you got into the human resources space.
Yeah, so it goes back a number of years. And after I graduated from high school, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do, but I started college and was working at the time. And I live in a smaller area, so a lot of professions have to wear multiple hats. And I was an office manager for a real estate firm. And that position kind of opened my eyes to human resources as a profession, because a lot of the duties that I had as an office manager kind of crossed over with human resources. So I had met my husband, and actually, since at that point in time in my life, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I was still pretty young, and so I just decided I'd put school on hold for a while. And I worked as the office manager of the real estate firm. And then I moved into another position that also had a lot of human resources related tasks. And so it was through those two positions that really showed me I really enjoyed that line of work. And so I did go back to school as a non-traditional student, older, and completed my undergrad, graduate, and graduate degrees, specifically in human resources management. And since then, I have continued to wear a lot of hats and focus not only just in human resources as a generalist. I've also done recruiting and talent acquisition. So I feel like I've kind of touched on every avenue of the human resources umbrella. And it's been really exciting. And I really enjoy the broadness of human resources as a profession.
You worked in 3 different environments, so that I think is really unique. You worked in the outside agency environment of recruiting, you worked in-house as talent acquisition, and then you've
Mhm.
also worked as a human resources professional. So tell me about the differences in the environments and what your key takeaways were with each.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a different spin to it, whether you're in house as a talent acquisition or a recruiter for a corporation versus agency. I the thing that was always kind of a struggle for me with agencies, it felt really transactional. And it was really hard to establish relationships with the people that you were trying to recruit. You definitely establish more of a relationship with the organizations that you're recruiting for if you had to recruit multiple positions for them. But if it was a situation where they just needed one hire, then it was really hard to establish the relationship there. And so I learned a lot working in an agency, but I'm more about those connections and building those relationships. So I just didn't feel like it was a good fit for me. So I was able to, at that point, transition into a role where I was doing talent acquisition for a corporate organization, and I really enjoyed it. You definitely get to build those relationships with hiring managers and with the talent that is trying to come in. So I really, really enjoyed that. And I think that actually gave me a little bit of an advantage because most people that are in recruiting, they don't always have an HR background. A lot of them have a sales background, actually. And recruiting is kind of the sales piece of the HR leg, so to speak, because you have to be able to sell the organization and the role to people. So, being able to come in it with that HR background, I had a better understanding of questions that you should and shouldn't ask from a legal standpoint. But also, I understood the value of the role talent acquisition and recruiting plays, because they are the face of the company. And it's usually the first interaction that anybody has with an organization. So they have a really big piece to play and a really big part in starting that relationship and what that individual's journey kind of looks like with a company. They're, everybody kind of sees HR as the gatekeeper, but I don't necessarily think they are. I think the talent acquisition and recruiting teams are the gatekeepers to the company.
What have you seen in your experience that's worked really well with the candidate experience being a positive one versus things that companies are doing that maybe they need to pivot, make transitions from?
I would say the number one thing that makes a tremendous difference in candidate experience is communication, communication, communication. And that is in all forms. Some of the organizations that I've seen that have been doing a really, really good job at it is all the way from their website when a candidate is applying for a job. One of the biggest aggravators that I heard is if a company has a website where you apply for the position, you upload your resume, and then you have to go and re-enter all of that information, they're losing a ton of applicants that way because it takes a lot of time. And it's, every candidate's like, why do I have to do this? If you ask for my resume, you already have the information. Companies that then will explain what the interview process looks like on their website. So the candidate knows up front, like if they're applying for this position, what does that look like? Is this going to be a couple week process for me? Is this going to take months and months before a decision's made? That might determine whether or not they're going to apply for the position. But being able to communicate that up front at least kind of sets the expectations. They know what to expect. And then follow up after they have interviewed for the positions. Companies that are following up on a consistent basis and notifying the candidates one way or the other are really, it just builds that trust. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people complain about the fact that they have applied for a position and then they hear nothing. Even when they submit the application, they don't even get like a thank you email. And then it will be months and months and months and months, and they've heard nothing. And then they randomly get a rejection email. So that just, it doesn't sit well with people, and it doesn't build any trust or confidence. And then they go and tell their friends about what their experience is like. So there's definitely things that companies can do to kind of set themselves up on the right foot to begin with. And I would say those are a few of the things that they can do.
Same thing on the agency side, that they'll apply to the position, and their resume will go to outer space. Never hear back. And then how excited are you to apply or express interest in working for them again if you didn't have a good experience the first time?
Absolutely. And, experiences can vary. Organizations can have a lot of good things in place, but then there are differences in who their recruiting teams are. And so you might have somebody on the team that isn't putting their best foot forward to represent the team and the company. And so that person might have a good or a bad experience with that one recruiter. So I think it's another thing that companies can do is make sure that they are all on the same page in terms of their recruiting team, what their vision is, and what their messaging is, and making sure that there is some sort of standardized process. So one recruiter isn't doing something different than another, that the communication and the process is the same regardless of what the position is or who the recruiter is.
So what can agency recruiters and or talent acquisition professionals do? I feel like a lot of times in the market, the recruiters will go out, whether it's talent acquisition or an agency recruiter, find the candidate ASAP, find a great candidate because the manager said they needed someone ASAP, which is always the response I get. And then you send the resume over and then it's crickets. And then you don't get a response on next steps for 2 weeks, because I get it,
Yeah.
they're busy too, but a lot of times top talent, they're not going to be hanging around, or they're going to be in
Hmm.
second and third rounds with other companies that move faster. So what can people
Yep.
do to get that process moving faster?
So one of the things that I did, both when I was in agency side and in corporate recruiting, is yeah, you can do everything correct, so to speak, as a recruiter, and then you pass it over to the hiring manager, and things fall off. And I know that hiring managers are busy because they have to work their everyday job on top of then trying to fill their team. So, things that I would do to try to bridge that gap is, if it was allowed, I would circle the candidate in with that hiring manager in terms of communication to make sure that it was a soft pass off and not a hard pass off. So the candidate knew that their application had been forwarded on to the next round. So they were kept in the loop there. But it also kind of keeps the hiring manager accountable, because then the candidate is looped into the conversation.
Companies do a better job about keeping that candidate engaged throughout the process and streamline the interview process so that they can cross the finish line with the
Mhm.
offer without getting into a multiple offer scenario.
Yeah, and that's sometimes difficult. Sometimes it's something that can't really be prevented, but I think the best you can do on the backside internally, by planning out what that process looks like ahead of time, the better. So, one of the things that I would always suggest my hiring managers do, knowing that they are very busy, if they had a position that they needed to fill, I would have them pre block time on their calendar so they would be able to move people through the interview process faster, instead of, okay, now we have somebody that looks good, let's interview them. Now we got to find time on everybody's calendar. So if they can pre-block those times and, just have that process laid out ahead of time, it definitely helps speed things up.
So company culture is a widely known feature slash buzzword in the recruiting and hiring world. What can companies do to do a better job of showcasing their company culture in the recruitment process?
Uh, this is a good question. And I think the best way to do that is, the more that they can have published out there in terms of ways they've given back, if that's one of their core foundations, videos. People are really drawn to videos. So if they can feature videos on their website that show what it is actually like in the organization, whether that be individuals in the organization sharing what their experience is like working in the organization, or why it is that they choose to continue working there, because it is a choice. If it's not a good place to work, people aren't going to continue working there. So if they can have those kind of videos, and then leverage social media, because not everybody's going to go to a company website. People live online. So in this day and age, the more they can showcase themselves on social media, the more of a following that they're going to create. Even if people aren't actively looking for jobs at that point in time, the more they can get themselves out there on social media, showing what a fun place it is to work, or what differences they're making with their organization. Are they tied to a social effort? Those type of things. I think especially now, this day and age, with after the pandemic, a lot of companies are struggling to get people to come back into the office, but they have to give them a reason why. Maybe they weren't tied to a bigger cause or a social endeavor prior to the pandemic. Well, people want to be connected. They want to have something bigger than themselves now. So I think that is something that they should definitely take advantage of.
You just talked about a hot topic that I see every day, all day in recruiting, and that is the remote work versus in office. And I
Hmm.
have so many phone conversations with candidates that their companies are mandating them go back on site.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they've made lifestyle choices and life choices to move other places, closer to family, different areas, maybe more rural, maybe more urban. And now, when employers have made the decision, it's turned everything upside down. And in my experience, the companies that are more flexible in that department are getting the better candidates.
Hmm. Yeah. And so I can kind of speak to this from both sides now because now I function more as an HR consultant. And I have one client in particular. They grew a ton during the pandemic, which is unusual. So they more than doubled their team size and they've outgrown the building that they're in. But they're a well established organization and they don't want to move buildings because everybody knows where they're located. And so they're kind of in this unique situation where they can't have everybody come back in the office. But there are certain positions that have to be in the office. So now they're kind of in this scenario of, well, the people that are able to work remotely or work hybrid at least, we feel like they have more work life balance than those of us that are in the office. But the people that are working remotely or hybrid, they're saying we have less work life balance because we don't have the option to leave the office and go home. We have to be on all the time. So there are two sides to that story. And there might be a little bit more flexibility in terms of like, okay, I can take an hour off here and, run to the doctor or something. Whereas if you have to be in the office, it's a little bit harder for you to do that. But yeah, I don't think there is a cut and dry answer. It's definitely a challenge. And I've heard that it's not just a challenge here in the US, it is a global problem. So employers are definitely going to have to get creative. That's for sure.
So, as we wrap up, how can our listeners find you?
Yeah. So I am on every platform possible, I think. So what I will do is I will give Caroline the my link to my bio. And I also have a link if you'd like access to a free ebook. You can go down or download it from that link and find out more and connect with me through my different social media platforms, which will be my link in my bio.
Thanks, Amy.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.